Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our participants. Thank you for joining all of us at the Institute for Safe Medication Practices for today's program entitled, A Look Behind the Scenes, Global Progress in Patient Safety and Prevention of Harmful Medication Errors. My name is Susan Paparella. I'm a Vice President at ISMP and a registered nurse by profession. I will be your host for today's program. Before we get started, let me extend a very special thank you to our educational partners, Novartis Pharmaceuticals Corporation, Name Creation, and Regulatory Strategy Section, who are generously supporting this program today. Some quick reminders. Today's program is being recorded. This recording will be available on the ISMP website later this week. Participants will be muted throughout the entire program. We are planning some time at the end for questions. Please enter any questions you have about the topic into the chat function, not the Q&A function, but the chat function located on your computer screen. We will do our best to answer these questions at the end of the program. Now, it is with great pleasure for me to introduce to you today our speaker, Mike Cohen, President of ISMP. Dr. Cohen's work in medication safety has spanned decades, and he is known worldwide for his passion and contributions to medication safety science. Mike has served terms on the US FDA Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee and the Non-Prescription Drugs Advisory Committee, and is also a current member of the USP Expert Committee on Labeling and Nomenclature, as well as consultant to the FDA. He is also chairperson of the International Medication Safety Network, or IMSN. Mike, good morning. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Susan, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Good evening. It's about 7 a.m. here on the East Coast of the United States. Seems to be the best time to get to the largest audience around the globe. So thanks for joining us, everybody. I just wanted to give some background on, the progress that's been made over the years. I've been doing this now really since the 1970s. We started a journal column in one of the pharmacy journals here in the United States, and I've have colleagues from different locations around the globe that also did columns in journals where they would ask for their colleagues to report medication errors, promising they would never identify individuals or their location. And the whole thing was for altruistic reason, just to turn that information around in a way that was beneficial. Every once in a while, I see a journal article, usually not focused on medication safety, but on patient safety, where it might be a reflection of a study that was done. And the theme seems to be that we haven't made a lot of progress in patient safety. I think the opposite is true with medication safety. And I wanted to give my perspective because I've been doing this for about almost 50 years now, when our journal column started. And I wanted to give my viewpoint. We have a lot of colleagues around the world through the International Medication Safety Network. We have over 25 countries actually that belong to that, and we meet regularly once a year in another country. We've been doing that for about 15 years. And we talk about these things. We have quite a few regulatory authorities. EMA is a member, the Food and Drug Administration here in the States, Health Canada, and Visa has come to our meetings in Brazil, and COFEPRIS in Mexico, and so on and so forth. Certainly Australia has been involved, and I can't name all the organizations. We have pharmacovigilance societies as well. And the whole focus is on what can we do better when it comes to medication safety? What can we do to improve regulated products? What can we do to improve practices? We also have colleagues that operate similar organizations to ISMP in other countries. In Canada, there is an ISMP Canada. And my colleagues in Canada have many of the same experiences that we have here. Same in Spain, ISMP Spain, same in Brazil, ISMP Brazil. And I also have colleagues in France that run similar programs through either through journals or through their national health ministries. England, for example, the National Health Service, they've done a tremendous amount in the United Kingdom, actually, to improve medication safety, in Ireland as well. So truly, it has been a global situation where a number of organizations are focused in this area. However, I have to say there are many areas of the country, of the world rather, that unfortunately, for whatever reason, have not made a lot of progress. And I wanted to talk about some of the things that I personally think, having been in this and having interacted on a global level for so many years, I want to talk about some of the things that I think do need improvement. And I want to start, for example, with the reporting program. Let me have the next slide. Lisa Shiroff, one of our administrative folks, is advancing the slides for me in this program. So thank you, Lisa. So this is actually the very first publication that we had back in 1975. It started as a column in the journal Hospital Pharmacy and kind of grew over the years into ISMP. And the very first one we had was simply an abbreviation that somebody told us about, where the letter U was used to abbreviate the word units, and it was seen as a 0. And on the very bottom on the left, you can see 6U regular insulin. That was read as 60. And in the newspaper clip, you can see that actually caused a death, with 5U being seen as 50 units per hour as an insulin infusion. So this really started us off. We started with a monthly column, and we put this information out there for practitioners. And it wasn't too long until we had enough material actually for a book, which was called Medicationers, aptly. And, you know, there was just a lot of learning that came through this program. And as time went on, let me have the next slide, Lisa. As time went on, you know, we started to realize more and more there was a need for this, even on a full-time basis. So I do want to talk about some of these issues that I think have been, you know, kind of like landmarks or really important things that have happened. So we carried on the reporting program from the mid-1970s throughout the 1980s. Our U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and I'll get to them in a minute, we were very fortunate here in the United States to have an FDA, and they became interested in medication error prevention in the late 1980s. We had some meetings with them, and they actually put together a labeling and nomenclature committee. More on that a little bit later. But they used the medication error reporting program. The same is true in Canada and some other countries, in Spain, for example, and in Brazil. They used that information that was sent to them through the medication error reporting program and ISMP operated to make changes in regulated products, labeling, packaging, drug naming, all those kinds of things. I think a very important thing happened in the 1990s, and that was we had an incident in Boston, Massachusetts, at a cancer hospital there. And unfortunately, the patient was killed because of a medication error. It was an overdose of a drug called cyclophosphamide. And the patient, Betsy Lehman, just happened to be an award-winning health columnist for the Boston Globe. And she suffered from breast cancer. And she was being treated, and the order for cyclophosphamide, which was used then, was written as Cytoxin, the brand name of the drug, 4 gram per meter square times 4D, meaning divide the 4 grams and each day give 1 gram, 1 gram, 1 gram, 1 gram over the 4 days per meter squared. Unfortunately, that was processed and staff took it as 4 gram, 4 gram, 4 gram, 4 gram. And it became very obvious and very clear that had that order been written as 1 gram per meter squared each day with the days listed, that error would not have happened. This got a tremendous amount of publicity. The colleagues, our colleagues, it made national news, not just in Boston, but all over the country. And really, it shocked the world. And As a result of this and some other very high-profile errors in the mid-1990s, our Congress in the United States became very concerned about safe practices, although we had been doing quite a bit on preventing medication errors. It never reached the level of national headlines as it did with this particular incident. Next slide, please. So what happened was the Congress funded our, was called the Institute of Medicine at the time. It's now called the National Academy of Medicine, but it was the Institute of Medicine. And this is a group of scientists, physicians, other health professionals, nurses, for example. Some pharmacists were on a liaison committee. ISMP was invited to participate, and we provided some testimony as a part of a liaison committee on medication errors. And they issued a report called "To Err is Human." And that just sounded the bell globally. To this day, we are still happy to say that we are addressing the major problems that were listed here, and dramatic improvement has happened in patient safety overall with the culture of safety, but also in product safety since that report was released. You probably have heard about that. You probably know about that. It was global, not just in the United States where it reached. And then the other report, which happened in the mid-2000s, about 2006, 2007, was preventing medication errors, excuse me, that got specifically into everyone's role, from regulatory agencies to the pharmaceutical industry, to practitioners, to accreditation organizations, and to standards organizations. What can we all do to prevent medication errors? So this was really something that was extremely important as well, and just furthered the growth in the focus on medication safety. So when I hear people say that we haven't really made much progress, that is exactly the opposite of my experience and the experience of others. And I wanted to go through that, and I talk about some of the things that we've been able to do that I think have had a major impact on improving safety, thankfully. And I want to talk about some of the issues, as I said earlier, that I think still need to be done. Next slide, please. So I think one of the early things that happened here in the United States and in some other countries, we were very fortunate that our pharmaceutical industry began providing new technologies where some of the medications were pre-mixed for us, that we did not have to actually compound in some injectable medications that were very commonly used, one of them being potassium chloride injection. So we have both the diluted forms in the base fluids, dextrose and saline and different strengths, and also in highly concentrated forms in flexible containers. Whereas we no longer need to store the concentrated vial that you see there all the way on the right on nursing units. And the reason that all this happened and why it was successful after the industry provided this, and it is available on an international level, but not to the extent that it needs to be. There are plenty of areas of the world that don't have this yet, and we still have the same problem. Look at the slide in the middle, the photo in the middle. This is what we had to contend with. We had look-alike vials and occasionally and distractions with the color caps and the blue labeling and the stripes on the lower right-hand corner. People did not read labels as they were supposed to. They were distracted by the appearance of these labels and would throw the potassium chloride in a bin of sterile water or saline that was used to reconstitute medications or draw up flush injections for IV catheters. And again, we started to receive these reports of deaths. In our case, we were very fortunate that the Joint Commission, who many of you know about Joint Commission International, we have a accreditation organization here in the United States that acted fairly promptly over a few years of getting these reports. They basically said, you know, and they listened to what ISMP was saying, and also Dr. Lucian Leap, who's one of the most important people in medication safety, we call him the father of medication safety. And they said, you know what? We will not allow potassium chloride concentrate on nursing units. And I will say that since the 1990s, when this happened, we have not had an incident on nursing units in an accredited organization where KCl injection was accidentally given as a flush or used as a reconstitution fluid for antibiotics and then injected intravenously into patients. And that, unfortunately, with the concentrations that we give IV push, we can kill someone. And, we have other ways of preventing that now with barcode scanning, for example. I'm going to get into that in a minute. But this was a major project. There was no evidence base for it. It was just all of us stepping forward and saying, we don't need to do that. We have flexible containers. Unfortunately, internationally, we don't have them where they're needed in all countries. And they're not very much more expensive. And, it gives you peace of mind. It's not more expensive than a syringe, than the time that you put into it with the labeling and distribution and et cetera, et cetera. And what happens is, unfortunately, in many countries, the nurses themselves are the ones that wind up making a lot of the sterile products right there on the nursing unit. I can tell you there are errors that don't get picked up when they compound, and there's no independent double check of the work that's done. We've had errors just within the last year. We know of 3 that have happened internationally with potassium chloride concentrate. So I will tell you, in those countries that have been able to use premix, I know there are a number of them. I know colleagues in the Middle East in many cases are able to use premix. We have eliminated this problem or reduced it dramatically. And it was a very serious one that killed patients many, many times. Next slide, please. Another issue was that we met early on was vincristine being given instead of intravenously through the intraspinal route, where it is almost uniformly fatal. Very few people survive. There have been a couple where there was a washout of spinal fluid when the problem was immediately recognized. And even then, patients have been paralyzed. But we have over 140 deaths where the drug was placed in a syringe and given instead of methotrexate or along with methotrexate when it was sent to the same area. And this was a rather common type of problem around the world. And just this past year in South America, we had a country where they killed 3 little children under 5 years old by accidentally giving them intrathecal or intraspinal vincristine. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we have long recommended on the left is the syringe, get rid of it. The flexible container on the right, it's diluted. It is only for IV. You wouldn't give this intraspinally. It is labeled with warnings. The syringe on the left, it has a warning on the cap. If you pull the cap off, it's not even there. And those giving the drug intraspinally, sometimes they're neurologists that do the lumbar puncture. They're not even familiar with the problem with vincristine. We recommend that it never even be sent to an area where methotrexate intraspinal is being given to leukemic children, for example. So in the United States, our Food and Drug Administration just recently removed syringe administration from official product labeling. We only prepare it now in mini bags. And that just happened this year. However, over 80% of hospitals in a survey that we did told us that they only use the mini bag. So another area that great improvement has happened, and we're not the only country that's done that. Next slide. Now we have a problem with methotrexate, and we still have that to some extent. And just recently we did some label changes in the United States, but I think other countries have done a much better job than we have. The EMA, for example, in Europe, they came out with recommendations even for packaging in a calendar pack, a limited supply of the drug. The problem here, it's accidentally given daily. People are so used to typing 1 tablet daily or 3 tablets daily for other drugs that they, instead of saying 3 tablets weekly, which is the proper dose, they accidentally type 3 tablets daily into the prescription or on the prescription label by the pharmacist. That's a serious problem, because if an elderly patient takes it for arthritis or psoriasis or whatever, they can unfortunately die from the overdose. And we've had a number of those cases reported here in the United States. I think in Europe, they just recently approved a packaging system where it's a calendar pack. And in Europe, those of you there and in many other countries around the world, We use loose tablets largely. We don't use a lot of calendar packs or patient packs, as you call them. I think that's an advance. It has a barcode on it, and you know, the photo on the bottom is from Spain, and you can't read the print very well, but it literally shows the patient who picks these up from the carton that this is for use once a week, and it's for psoriasis and Reiter's syndrome and you know, rheumatoid arthritis, and that's the only reason that it's used, and it should only be given once a week. So we hope to have more in advance here in the United States. We have some changes that we're very happy to see. They have taken something like, you know, Q12 hour times 3 doses, which was confusing. That's no longer in the labeling. But these last 3 are just examples of some of the increases in safety that have been afforded to our patients. We also have safety checklists for this that we've prepared. Next slide, please, Lisa. Another thing, and this is happening worldwide, just beginning in some countries. The regulators have joined through the International Medication Safety Network that I mentioned, and we've come up with some documents that we're trying to get harmonized around the world. I mean, I go to other countries, if I visit a hospital, I commonly will see ampules as a dosage form, and the labels are almost impossible to read, as you see here. And sometimes I see black print on, you know, with a black background in an operating room. It's almost impossible to read, so very easy to mix things up in their storage bins. We've had some companies that have taken this into account. And next slide. This is from Colombia, the Vitalis company. Look at the improvement here in the labeling of glass ampules. If you're going to use them at all, in the US, we don't use very many ampules at all. Most of the ones are imported, and they're not very many at all. But if you're going to use them at all, I would certainly hope that manufacturers would be looking at how they label with a ceramic background or a paper background so that the labels can be read, and barcodes, we'll talk about that in a minute, can be scanned. Look at, these are the same drugs, by the way, on the right, as you see there on the left. What a difference. And this has happened in some other countries too. Here in the United States, I would think it'd be pretty difficult to get an ampule approved without a background. Next slide. So again, you know, and the manufacturers around the world have been asked, you know, by our International Medication Safety Network. And lately, we have actually approached the International Council on Harmonization to take up a number of recommendations that the International Medication Safety Network put together in a white paper. And I'll show you them in just a second. We all met, and if you look at the slide on the right, the photo on the right, you can see the participants that came to the US. We met at the Food and Drug Administration headquarters, and all of these agencies participated. This was held by IMSN, and the US Food and Drug Administration hosted it. There are some of the attendees in the picture. This was in June of 2018. And we came up with a number of guidelines that we feel manufacturers around the world should meet. I think one of the problems that we've run into is, you know, in many areas of the world, they do not have their own pharmaceutical industry, so they don't have a way of regulating the industry and, you know, to putting barcodes on, to having a system for applying a barcode, or for requiring a background on ampules, or for not allowing certain abbreviations on labels, or for expressing the concentration in a way that will prevent medication errors. So that's what we came up with here. Next slide. We made a number of recommendations, and they're on our International Medication Safety Network, and our FDA submitted these to ICH at the end of last year, and ICH has distributed these to pharmaceutical manufacturers from around the world to get their input to see where things sit. So we're in the middle of this right now. But in some countries, they were using ounces instead of 120 milliliter, it would say 4 ounces. We even measured things in the apothecary measure, drams, fluid drams. That's crazy. People would mix these up with teaspoons. A household measure. We have seen 5 teaspoons given multiple times instead of 5 milliliters by parents because a pharmacist accidentally typed that, or teaspoons was on the label. So we are pushing for metric units, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Most of you have done that already. We're backwards here in the US. We still measure people in pounds. We still measure people not in kilograms. So this is, we have had a lot of medication errors where somebody confuses, 2.2 pounds as 1 kilogram versus 1 kilogram. So we have math errors that happen as well, or even order entry errors where they put the number of pounds instead of the number of kilograms. And all of our dosing in the labeling is in, milligram per kilogram. So it doesn't make sense to measure people in pounds and weigh them, but that's what we do here in the States, and we need to change that. Eliminate potentially error-prone abbreviations. One that I do see internationally is IU for international unit. In the US for drugs, we've dropped the word international. We just use units. There are some biologicals that still have international units for whatever reason. We want to fight against that. And the problem, if it's abbreviated, IU, if it's ever handwritten, it looks like IV. And we've had drugs given that are supposed to be IM or oral given intravenously instead. Prominently display cautionary statements on carton and immediate container labels of paralyzing agents like neuromuscular blockers, potassium chloride concentrate injection, methotrexate, and other selected error-prone medications. We have been doing that in the United States. It's not the be-all that ends all. It's one thing that can, be a certain layer of safety. People are educated by reading these. The placement and the visibility is critically important on how these are. But our neuromuscular blockers, on the cap, it says warning paralyzing agent of all of them. It says the same on the label, and it warns that anybody must be on a be receiving artificial respiration through a ventilator or whatever. We want the per milliliter and the per container quantity of injectable drugs on the label. Many countries still use the amount per milliliter, even though it's a 10 milliliter container. And, you may not have a reporting program, but we know for a fact, because we experienced it here, that some nurses will pick up a 10 milliliter vial and think it holds the amount per milliliter because it says 10 milligram per mil, not 100 milligram per 10 ml. Multiple times. That became a standard here in the United States. I'll show you that in a minute. Our United States Pharmacopoeia is a standards organization. They work hand in hand with our Food and Drug Administration. And they have a labeling and nomenclature committee, which I happen to serve on, by the way. And we tackle many problems that have led to serious medication errors. Most recently, it's standardization of expiration dates. We had many different ways of expressing it, and we caused problems. So these are the kinds of things that have resulted over the years of getting experience from the reporting program, to all of us, which we turn over to our FDA, we turn over to USP. The same happens in Canada and Brazil and Spain and in other countries, Australia, et cetera, or New Zealand, et cetera. So, it's not all the same, but a lot of the activities are. Next slide. Just a few more things on this request from the regulators and all the agencies that participate in this meeting. Contrasting backgrounds, as I said, for the glass ampules. We have a lot of errors with vaccines that have a diluent or an adjuvant liquid, and some of them have been fatal. Just recently in Samoa, there were 2 children that were killed when nurses accidentally picked up an ampule of atracurium and used that to dilute measles vaccine, measles, mumps, and rubella. And the same thing happened in Syria with 15 children killed with the paralyzing agent diluent. We want to see the vaccine manufacturers integrate the fluid chamber with the lyophilized powder rather than having 2 separate containers. We have done that with some drugs like our intravenous steroids, medroxyprogesterone, I'm sorry, I forget the name of I stumbled on it. I didn't forget it, but I stumbled on it. We have a fluid chamber and a lyophilized powder chamber, and it works very, very well. Develop product-specific world safety standards, for example, standard packaging for non-oncologic methotrexate, as EMA is doing right now. And we definitely need a barcode system. We have had such great improvement by being able to scan at the bedside, being able to scan when we're making sterile compounds in the pharmacy, all the electrolyte ingredients or drug ingredients, being able to scan before we dispense in our provide that. I'm not sure what happened. Please bear with me 1 second. Okay, thank you. So this is, these are just, yeah, Sue, can you put the full slide on maybe? If not, this will do. I guess we can do this. Just so you see that our governments have learned from this. They do provide safety consideration to prevent medication errors from names. Not sure what's happening here. I can't see the screen.
Mike, I think maybe Lisa's switching to full screen.
I'm sorry? Lisa, I'm not sure what happened. I'm unable to see the screen anymore. Pardon us, folks. We'll be with you in just a minute. We'll get this right. Okay. Thank you, Lise. Appreciate that. So this is a published guidance. They do a lot of this from information that's collected from ISMP and from their own reporting program. They have their own reporting program, and it's guidance for industry. They have one for nomenclature, for drug naming. They have more than one, actually, and they have more than one for preventing medication errors with labeling and packaging. And so this information is known by industry right up front, and they can design the labels properly. Next slide, please. United States Pharmacopoeia, I mentioned them. They have a whole section of the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is enforceable, and the FDA does enforce these standards, where we outline all of the things that I've been talking about, including many more, not just the concentration expression on labels, but we recently removed ratio expressions. So around the world, we know for a fact that about 25% of physicians in a study do not know what 1 to 1,000 is, or 1 to 10,000. They don't know how much, and we have people confuse them. We have people give 1 milliliter IV push of 1 to 1,000 instead of 1 to 10,000, and or 0.4 milliliters. We have of 1 to 10,000 instead of 1 to 1,000 for an anaphylactic reaction, 0.6, whatever the dose it may be. So these are outlined, and this is available in some other countries as well. This is another advance, I think. Next slide, please. So this is what I was talking about with the drug concentration on the left. I can't tell you how many times nurses picked up this vial, which is 40,000 units on the left, and they saw 10, and when they had to give a 10,000 unit injection or prepare a 10,000 unit infusion, they put the whole ingredients in from the bottle, or added 40,000. Simply by USP creating a standard, which took a little bit of while through that labeling and nomenclature committee. This is the way all of our pharmaceutical injectables are now labeled, with the total amount per container, and then immediately under, for those that want to see how many units or milligram exist in 1 milliliter, we have 10,000 per milliliter. So these vials are exactly the same amount of heparin. And, you know, this has been a major improvement. We have very, very few of these types of errors. Everyone has gotten used to it now. And this was a real problem for us where people would be overdosed. That doesn't happen anymore like it used to. Next slide. That's one of the recommendations too. And also, we have a lot of look-alike drugs. We have a way to even send out international alerts within just a few minutes when something very serious is happening. On the left, neostigmine to reverse neuromuscular blocker paralyzing agent overdose, not overdose, is a, you know, in a patient when you're extubating them, you know, phenylephrine injection. So imagine having to mix these two up, and boy, we were getting reports all the time. People don't know those brand names, so they thought they had neostigmine when they had phenylephrine, and they were injecting that instead of, and that obviously wasn't reversing it. So, you know, FDA got involved, the company got involved, and just a simple change of making a color differentiation there eliminated the problem. We have not had any problems since that was done. Next slide. What we really like to see is pre-market screening. Any company that comes out with a new drug should be doing pre-market screening. We happen to have a separate organization called Medication Safety Board. There are several other companies that provide that service and actively. And, you know, many of the companies are able to go to these organizations and they do field testing. They provide their expertise and make sure the regulations are met, et cetera, et cetera. So this is another service that's developed in the industry. And also name testing is another thing that is done. Medication Safety Board doesn't do that, but many of these other companies do. So this is a real help, and you know, companies avail themselves to this testing. Many of you that are listening did not know that that actually does take place. Not all over the world, though. That's the problem. We want to see more of that. Next slide. We serve as an early warning system, our reporting programs around the world, learning. And by the way, we are not about collecting thousands and thousands and thousands of reports. If I told you we had 3 million reports sent to us, that is not what we're about. We have a few thousand reports sent to us a year, but what we're getting is an individual contacting us. We talk to them, we email them. They send us photographs of the problem products. They send us screenshots. This is the best type of reporting program. Any healthcare practitioner can use it. There is no cost for using it. And it's based on people wanting to see things change. So they will work with us in any way they can to get this accomplished. They know that we follow up and we publish it in the newsletter. They know that we talk to FDA or Health Canada or Anvisa in Brazil or the Prescrire folks in Paris, France, or in England, the medication safety officers there interact with their authorities as well and inform everyone. And it's not just product issues, it's practice issues. That's why we interact with the Joint Commission and Joint Commission International and try to improve the standards that, you know, hold practitioners to certain safe practices. Every country needs, every region, I should say, needs a reporting program where any provider can directly report, not through an incident report that has to go to the regulatory authority or to the accreditation organization that they may mandate. Not that. A voluntary practitioner report gives you more information than any type of program that is very, very costly to run. You know, they're both important because you need the data as well. You need numbers. So that type of reporting, our FDA reporting, for example, or some in the United States, we have patient safety organizations that collect incident reports and protect them from discovery. We have a very active program here in the United States. This institutes product nomenclature changes, labeling, and then the standards and guidelines as well. Next slide. Here's where we get our information. This is what I would recommend in other countries. Somebody needs to step forward. I know there are people listening here that are going to say, well, how do I get started? How we got started was simply going to one of the journals and saying, you know what, we would like to start a reporting program. We'll start with a column or two on our own. We'll tell, you know, some experiences that we've had. We won't say where they happen, and we'll invite people to report to us. And then we'll write it up. And we'll use our expertise as pharmacists, nurses, and doctors. We'll consult with our colleagues, and maybe we start every other month. But there's a journal that might want us to do that. That's what my colleagues in England did. David Upton and David Cousins. They started that in the 1980s or 1990s. And eventually it had an impact on their government. And now they have more sophisticated programs. So that's really been important. And they've grown in other countries as well. We have a consumer reporting program that we hear from. We hear from practitioners. We hear from our medication, our reporting, and our vaccination, our reporting program. It's had an impact on vaccine safety. You know, I was talking about Samoa. Not only did those 2 children die from atracurium, but there's a group in the South Pacific that is against vaccines, and they scared parents from taking their children for vaccines. That happened in the South Pacific. And over 80 children died from measles-related pneumonia because they were not vaccinated last year. And that's as of January. There's probably more deaths since then. That's very sad. And it doesn't have to be. We do have a cooperation with our FDA, so we can share FAERS reports, the FDA Adverse Event Reporting System. If we need info, they'll send it to us. We send them every one of our reports. And then if we see something in the media, we use that as well. ISMP, Canada, Spain, Brazil, very similar. International Medication Safety Network, medsafe.net. We are about to start a medication error reporting program on that website, where our medication safety fellows at ISMP will kind of oversee that. And we're going to invite people to get things started internationally for countries that don't have programs. Let's hear from you, and we can start that until you get something started on your own. And be patient. It might take years to do it. But, you know, we've developed over 50 years. Hopefully things won't take that long. And hopefully you will get support from your regulators. Our output is to the groups there on the right: organizations, practitioners, consumers, regulatory authorities, standards organizations, accreditation organizations, Joint Commission benefits, for example, USB, and then industry. Next slide. We do have a memorandum of understanding with FDA, which is very helpful. That has been a real boon to, we have almost daily interaction. We have monthly meetings with them. Next slide. I would highly advise that something like that be set up in other countries. We have a relationship that really won't quit. It's all about making the improvements that you see there on the slides, where we can say, hey, you know, we just had a name mix-ups between Lasix and Wakix. And, you know, FDA can look at that. They look at how frequent it's happening. They look to see, you know, what the risk is. And on occasion, they will change names. They will ask the manufacturers to change names. We do see publications from FDA in our newsletter. They're available on the FDA website. We share a fellowship program to educate new practitioners. And guidance statements that I just showed you a little bit ago also are part of it. And FDA develops them on their own. Next slide. I hope you'll read this a little bit later, but this is how we process those medication errors that come in from the time a report is received and enter into our database, all the way through staff review, identifying whether we need to do more investigation, conducting that investigation, interacting with the reporter, coming up with recommendations that we write in our newsletters and our journal columns for, you know, practitioners in the country, just like the other ISMPs do, just like others do in other countries. And then, you know, working with FDA and manufacturers, trying to get them on board with the changes that are needed, and that takes time. And our regulators have to work directly with the companies. They don't go through us, obviously. They have proprietary issues that they have to deal with. So it can take time. And then we also use aggregate data to support a lot of the things that we want to do. And the numbers are important there. So we tap into FDA Adverse Event Reporting System or other reporting systems for the numbers. Next slide. I think this has been a real key to success globally, the reporting program. So I would not hesitate. If you have any way to get something started and you don't have something going, people will want to do this. And, they want to do something. We're all health professionals. We don't want to hurt patients. We want to make the changes that are necessary. And again, I'm afraid you're going to have to be patient in some areas, but please do consider this, or please do consider using the International Medication Safety Network reporting program. Again, intmedsafe.net. We're going to be starting that soon. We'll make announcements. It's not well, I did have a few more slides. Not sure if we're going to be able to get to them. I know Lisa's trying, and obviously she must have run into some kind of a situation, and I am very sorry for that. What we'll do, we'll go back to this part, and oh, there we go. Great. So I'm going to, actually, we kind of covered everything on this. We do have those publications that I talked to you about. This is, keep going, next slide. Okay, the answer is yes. Increased reporting, improvements in the safety culture. We're no longer blaming people for making an error. That's a big step. We're looking more at the system issues than we are the people issues. We've developed a list of high alert medications that is on our website. These are the drugs and drug categories that are likely to injure patients. And we want everybody to focus more on these than all the other type of medications. So people sometimes say, how do I get a program started? I would say a safety committee has to come up with a list of those drugs and drug categories which are most likely to injure people. A good start is on our website, the ISMP list of high alert medications. And that's where you focus your effort on actionable items that you really can do something about to protect your patients in your facility or your pharmacy. There's one here for community pharmacy as well. Next slide, please. We have been able to come up with a list of items that are very serious errors that we focus on. We have about 16 of them now, I believe. We call them targeted medication safety best practices. It's a spotlight program. Let me see the next slide, because we list some of these and what they are, and you can get them on our website. This is available. Next slide. Okay, we started out with vincristine in a mini bag, and we did baseline surveys, and we went from 40% to over 80%. Oral methotrexate is one of our spotlight. We have a lot of recommendations. It's not just the name of the drug. We give detailed information about the problem and what needs to be done about it. So we don't have time to go through all these, but you can see, some of the issues that we've been dealing with in the United States, and you can do the same thing in your country. Be famous, come up with a list, work with your professional organizations, focus on things that will help to improve safety of your patients. There's no reason you can't learn from other countries that are doing this, and there are many of them. Next slide. And these are some of our websites. Please go to our websites. ISMP.org is our main website. You'll see some of the others. Next slide. One is for consumers. One is the medication safety officers. Lots on drug name mix-ups that we've been able to do. You can see what happened here. One is an eye drop. The other is for a local infection like warts. And the names are very, very similar. And this caused serious problems. Our FDA made one of the companies change the name. Next slide. Handwritten errors that get confused. I'm going to have to bypass these because we're starting to run out of time. There's a lot that's been done on preventing drug name mix-ups. One of the things that we've done is come up with a list of what we call tall man letters. We're looking now for better ways to do this. I show you tall man letters there with One of the most common mix-ups we have is hydroxyzine and hydralazine. And so we boldface and put a color background on one of the company's labels to call out the difference between hydroxyzine and hydralazine. AALA would be the highlighted text. We're just learning how to do that better than we have in the past, I think, on site. But the most important thing is, in the US, we have a barcode on every product. That has been required since the mid-2000s. FDA implemented that. And we have a numbering system. You can see the number on that label there. It's called the National Drug Code, where we can get this right down to the individual dose at the bedside, and it has a barcode on it. You could do it with your patient pack. Many of you are doing that now. I feel bad for the countries that don't have their own industry, because when they import drugs from various countries, they may not even have a barcode, or they may have a variety of barcodes, which makes it difficult for them. Next slide, please. Again, name guidance exists from FDA. Next slide. We have mandated electronic prescribing. There are large parts of the world that haven't even thought of electronic prescribing at this point. That still doesn't mean they can't improve safety. With some of the things like a focus on high alert drugs and working with colleagues and saying, you know, what can we do to increase the number of independent double checks that are made before that drug is given? What can we do to add auxiliary labels? What can we do to store these differently than we are now? Maybe some of these drugs should not even be used, or we buy them from a different manufacturer. You know, so it isn't just about electronic prescribing and barcoding, but everybody needs to be doing this, and it will take time. We'll eventually get there. A lot of screen selection errors we see now, even with electronic prescribing. Bad handwriting, we had to call. There was handwriting that wasn't so bad that made one drug name look like another drug name. And now that we've gone to electronic, sometimes we see people type in the first few letter characters like MET, and then we get 4 or 5 different drugs that start with MET and they choose the wrong one. So we're seeing a lot of those errors, and we're looking for ways to make improvements there that we haven't come up with yet. But we have some ideas. Next slide. Bedside scanning has been critically important, and being able to use the barcode allows that. Lord knows how many medication errors have been prevented in these different areas, in the pharmacy and at the bedside and in IV admixture production. Next slide. We have smart infusion pumps, another technology where we build in drug libraries, and we have even integrated these with the medical records. This is an advanced technology that we have been using, and some other countries are starting to use as well. The library, when we enter the information either in the order in the medical record or at the bedside into the pump itself, it will warn you that the rate that you've set that pump at or prescribed is too high, it's not safe, and it will stop it in some cases. There's a lot more to it that I don't have time to explain, but these are the different pumps that are available for that in the United States. We have some syringe pumps as well. And I know a lot of you use syringe pumps, and they have, some of them have built-in libraries. I know that we are seeing that in other countries as well. This is a real help. There's some studies that do show that it can be helpful in preventing medication errors. Next slide. So we're really capitalizing on technology. We have automated dispensing cabinets. The word is still out on safety depending on how they're designed. It's very easy to put the wrong dose, a wrong drug back into a slot unless you have what you see there in the middle, a lidded pocket that won't be opened unless you have that specific drug. We also require for overrides where the patient's record doesn't have the drug listed, and sometimes that happens. You can control what can be accessed on override. You can control on how many letter characters you need to add. We had a horrible error here in the United States where a patient with severe anxiety was supposed to be given Versed, the brand name for midazolam, and the nurse typed in VE and instead got vecuronium, which wasn't on the patient's drug profile, but the VE brought up vecuronium, and the nurse thought that was the correct drug, and that was a paralyzing agent, and unfortunately the patient died. So we now actually have a way with one of the systems. The other one is coming out with something soon where you need at least 5-letter characters in order to pull something up onto the screen. Next slide. And we do the same thing in IV production. We have ways of, and that started in Germany, the gravimetric system that you see there on the right with the scale. We also barcode scanning. We have photographic documentation of what was used. So there is great advantage. Now, not every hospital is using this. A lot of them are doing things on their own, and we want to see this mandated. So we started that. If you see our newsletter, it's on our website now from our last issue, last Thursday. We said we called upon the regulators, the standards organizations, and other authorities to mandate IV workflow or barcode scanning at a minimum in IV sterile compounding. Next slide. And you know, these are just some of the things that we can initiate with sterile compounding. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. Sue, can you just go to the last couple of slides? Oh, pre-filled syringes. I don't want to miss that. Go back to that. So important to take advantage of, you know, not making the nurses make their own. You don't know what's going on the nursing units. And a large portion of the world, nurses are still drawing up medications on their own. They're not getting labeled. They are mixing up drugs, just like we've seen here in the past. They don't have barcode scanning. And so we really push ready to use, you know, products that can be activated at the bedside in some cases, but ready to use is the best way to go. And that is practiced here in most hospitals in the United States. Next slide. Lots of guidelines, guidances are available on our website and on other websites. We have assessments for safety. These are also guidelines. We have catheter misconnection prevention. We have ISO standards now for gastric connectors and for neuraxial connectors. There are 2 that are being implemented here in the United States. I think the emphasis on safety in healthcare, we have the medication safety officer. So get to the last, the couple of slides where I list, yeah, where should further efforts? And please bear with me, we just have a few more minutes. If you can wait till I go through these. And then you can submit your questions and we'll get back to you on them. Reduced reliance on nurses and anesthesiologists to prepare doses is critical. I've just gone through that. Using premix, prefilled, making that technology available worldwide. Greater availability and use of ready to use prefilled syringes. Availability of barcodes or radio frequency ID. For the purposes that I already outlined, manufacturer adherence to guidelines established by global regulators and the International Medication Safety Network. I think that is critically important. Creation of independent voluntary provider reporting programs. I spoke about that. It's more about them giving you narrative information and being able to talk to you on the phone and explaining things and sending auxiliary materials and giving you their ideas on what to do to prevent it. And then you communicating that information. Not just the field through your newsletter, regulators, organizations, and the accredited independent reporting programs. I have to because involved in errors, so that happens. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and I'm ending right on the hour. Why don't we try to take a couple of questions? Do we have the ability to do that, Sue, or is that now wiped out as well?
We're good, Mike.
Okay, why don't you give me a couple of questions, and then we'll ask for people to send us to ISMP or info, ISMP info at ismp.org. And
okay, so Mike, we have a question that says, has any consideration been given to whether electrolyte are safe prescribed as millimole or milliequivalents or gram of salt. I find particularly risky when more than one salt is available.
Yeah, that's the case. The same, but it's not the same. No, we states are.
Hospitals have resources to prepare concentrated electrolytes in bags or have access to pre-mixed electrolytes. What else could be done in these low resource settings?
Yeah, exactly. I was saying that I know not all hospitals have that, and I certainly hope that happens in the future. And some places can import. It would probably raise the cost. I think things like what I used to do before we had a mechanism for that, I would put the individual, it sounds crazy, but I'd add auxiliary labels to the files. I would be very careful on how these were stored. I would want to make them look different. I would want to add a warning. In some cases, I would even, where you don't use a large number of them in some areas, I would use mini or little Ziploc bags and put information in there. I would use warning systems where the vials are kept in a storage cabinet, for example. But it is a real problem. I would certainly want to make sure that there wasn't color similarities. We did have that, and that was one of the big problems where sodium chloride 0.9% and potassium chloride looked the same, and occasionally they were left on a counter and somebody would take the KCL. It wasn't even a nurse. It could be a patient assistant, and then throw it in the bin for sodium chloride. And then I remember I got a letter from one of the fathers of a new nurse, and he said, my daughter just killed someone with a baby with potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride that somebody put in the sodium chloride bin, and she reconstituted a baby's ampicillin. How tragic. It was one of multiple cases that we had that were very similar. So I think if you stick your heads together, you will come up with ways, even if vials are still there. And I think you got to start really pushing your hospital administration. You need to have pharmacy preparation and pharmacy storage and pharmacy with auxiliary labels wherever possible. It may be not possible in some areas. So unfortunately, it's going to take time to make those changes. One more, Sue?
Sure. Do you have any examples of mandated patient education programs for high alert medications?
Yes. If you go to our website, we have actually done that. We've made a checklist for all the major, and this would be for community pharmacy dispensing, outpatient pharmacy dispensing, nursing education at the bedside. We have them for the insulins, the various insulins. We have them for the newer oral anticoagulants. We have them for warfarin, if you're still using warfarin. We have them for opioids. We have them for transdermal fentanyl, the patches. In fact, anybody that discharges a patient or gives them a prescription for transdermal fentanyl for the first time, you certainly want to make sure they're not opioid naive. You certainly want to make sure that the dose is correct, that patients know to remove the patch before they put another one on. All of these things are listed on our checklist for patients, where the pharmacist can educate them. They are available on both of our websites for consumers. If you go to our consumer website, consumermedsafety.org, we have that pictured in one of the slides, or our ISMP.org website, and you will find, and by the way, you might have to sign in and get a password, but that's only happened once. There's no charge. You can, from then on, we just want to know who's going on our website. From then on, you can just use the same password. You will find those sheets. They're translated. We have them in some other languages as well. They're in Arabic, for example, some of them. I think we have French, have some in Spanish. So they're not all available, but there's a variety of high alert drugs that are where we have these patient education sheets that you can download. They're very attractive, and it's a great thing to sit with them at the bedside for these high alert drugs. I wish we could do this for all medications, but we did these under a grant from FDA, and you know, there's only so much funding for that that you can capture. I'll do one more in case people want to stay on another minute.
Just, there's a few more here. How about this? Most of the errors are related to humans reading, picking, or administering wrong drugs. Would the 100% bedside verification process driven by barcodes be a definitive solution?
I think I heard that, you know, where they confuse one drug for another and maybe pick up the wrong thing. And the answer is yes. As long as the order has been entered through the regular prescribing system, and the doctor has selected the proper drug, that's another key. I mean, if they selected the wrong drug, you're going to process the wrong drug. By the way, we are seeing the advent of indication-based prescribing. So for example, you would know if the patient has diabetes, you would call up their condition and it would list certain drugs for diabetes, the insulins, the oral agents, some of the new GLP-1 agonists, they would be listed there. And so you would have to choose from that list. If you go to get another drug that isn't listed there, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want this? Because this isn't listed in the drugs for diabetes. So we're beginning to see that happen. And that's a great way to prevent errors. But yes, as long as the order is ordered correctly and it goes through the system and it's been approved by pharmacy in our hospitals, then yes, it will appear on the nurse's medication administration record. And it is set to scan the right drug. If you scan the wrong barcode, it will immediately alarm the nurse and say, that's not the right drug. And so that would be a hard stop and you'd have to follow up. Unfortunately, there are some cases where that can be overwritten. And we have had mix-ups like insulin pens. We have a big problem with insulin pens in American hospitals. We use them wildly. And without a good barcode scanning system that identifies patient and drug, we have a lot of pens that are reused on the wrong patient. And then you risk infections like hepatitis B and HIV, et cetera.
And Mike, I think unfortunately we are about out of time here. So, once again, thank you so much for your inspirational thoughts on the global progress that we've made in patient safety and the prevention of harmful medication errors. I want to thank too Novartis for their generous support of this program, and certainly to you, our participants, for your very kind attention. This concludes our webinar for today.